All right, hey there, folks. Well, the world seems to be as goofy as ever these days, so I figured I would keep bringing book tour to you. So, welcome to Russ's Rockin' Rollercoaster, intriguing interviews with creative minds. Well, it's that time again where another season is coming to a close, which always gives me an extra jolt. So for the spring 2026 season finale, please welcome my old pal and horror mainstay James Chambers. Jim is a Stoker and Scribe-winning horror author and podcaster who has written multiple novels and short stories across crime, fantasy, horror, pulp, sci-fi, steampunk, and more. He served as the editor of the Stoker Award nominated anthologies Under Twin Suns, Alternate Histories of the Yellow Sign, and A New York State of Fright, and wrote the original graphic novel Kolchak the Night Stalker, the Forgotten Lore of Edgar Allan Poe. James is also co-host of the Galactic Terrors podcast, and when clearly he doesn't sleep, he is co-chair of the New York chapter of the Horror Writers Association. Welcome back, Jim.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Russ. I'm happy to be here and looking forward to chatting.
Yeah. All right. Just heads up to the folks at home. Feel free to send any notes for me or Jim in the chat box, and we'll get to a few at the end.
Cool.
All right. So just a little background for the folks who are watching. So Jim and I go back a lot of years. We've been at this a long time. So this is going to be extra fun for me. All right, Jim. So as we always do, we're going to start at the beginning. Where were you born? Where did you grow up?
Long Island to both answers.
Okay.
Yeah,
Where?
to both answers.
So what part of Long Island?
Uh, Mostly Nassau County. I was born, s- lived when I was very, very little out in Suffolk County, on the east end past Riverhead, pretty far out. And then we moved closer to the city. And so I grew up mostly in Nassau County, about a 5-minute drive from the Nassau-Queens border.
Where? What town?
Different towns,
Okay.
Stuart Manor, Garden City, uh,
Oh,
lived in Williston Park for a while. So different places. We moved around a bit before we settled in Garden City.
okay. So, all right. So hang on. So let's unpack that a little bit. So what kept you guys moving around?
You know what? That's a good question. I should probably ask my parents that someday. It was, when we were too little, I was just like, oh, we're moving again. Okay. We don't, not that we were like nomads or anything, but I think it was just, kind of trying out different places. And we wound up moving back near family. So we wound up a few blocks from like my grandmother and family in the other direction, just, a short distance. So I think it was mostly just to get back to closer to family.
Okay. All right. Hang on a second. So there's a lot in there I want to get to. So first of all, so what was the lineup? Is it just you? Do you have brothers, sisters?
I have two sisters, yeah, but they're both much younger than I am. They're 10 and 11 years younger than me. So I was an only child for about a good decade,
Okay.
which probably explains why I'm very content to spend a lot of time by myself reading books and
Yeah.
writing and doing stuff like that.
Right. Right. So by the time your sisters came along, you know, never in the same school, don't have the same peer group. So what was that? I mean, that's sort of interesting because so I have two sisters also, but
Yeah.
my sisters are twins, but they're 4 years younger. So we socialized a bit, but with you, it's almost like, so when you were 12 and they were in diapers. So
Yeah.
so what was that like for you to be a big brother at that stage?
I was great. Yeah. I mean, I loved having sisters. They were terrific. We would play and do stuff and, I'd help out as much as I could. For my age, who wants to clean diapers? And I don't think I did a lot of that, but
Nobody likes it at any age.
yeah, exactly. But, it was, so, all those memes about the Gen X life. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
literally that meme when my sisters were born because, school days aside, I would leave the house at 10 a.m. and my parents were like completely focused on an infant and a toddler and, whatever. And as long as I got back home before dark, like
Right.
literally, as long as I
Yep.
got back home before dark, um, with all my limbs attached. It was pretty much, I was on my own because of that. So it was an interesting experience. So, regular routine, I did spend more time with them and, would play games and do stuff with them, my sisters. And we have good relationships today. So it didn't, there's always sibling friction and sibling rivalry, but there wasn't so much rivalry because we
Right.
were so different, right?
I was just
Yeah.
going to ask you about, I mean, because so at that point, maybe it's a weird thing where, like, on the one hand, it's sort of like, everybody sort of wants attention for themselves. But once you start hitting 12, 13, 14, you actually kind of don't want attention. Screw you, leave me alone, don't talk to me. But then it's sort of like, well, but why aren't you talking? I know I told you not to talk to me, but why aren't you talking to me?
Yeah, I was okay with
Yeah,
that. I was
yeah,
okay with the
yeah,
unprecedented level of freedom. I had a
yeah.
bicycle and no cell phone, and
Right,
if somebody needed to get me, it was all right. Let's start calling his friends' houses and see if anybody knows where the boys are today.
right. Yeah, absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely.
and by the time my sisters were that age, by the time they were teenagers, I was
Out of the house,
I was
right?
out of that. Yeah, I was. Well, I think I lived after college. I moved back home for a little bit and then moved out.
Yeah, I mean, like, but you were at sort of, by the time your sisters were, 10, 12, 14, you were a young adult by then.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Wow. So what did your parents do? Did they work? Like, what was their situation?
Yeah, my dad worked full time. He's a lawyer, and my mom was mostly, she stayed home and took care of us.
Just out of curiosity, was he like a general practitioner? Did he focus on one particular aspect of law?
Um, yeah, he's done a little of this, a little of that, but I think primarily sort of accident and personal injury law.
Okay, okay, okay. Did that like Was he one of those dads who was like, he was a lawyer, so he wanted you to be a lawyer, or was he just like, just go do whatever?
No, he never wanted me to be a lawyer. I mean, I think if I decided I wanted to be a lawyer, he would have supported that. But I think he could probably tell that's not where my interests were driving me. And he's a big reader. So that
Oh,
was one of the things growing up. Both my parents were and are readers, and my dad was
oh,
a science fiction fan, and
oh,
so
really?
I
Okay,
grew up with like an amazing library of sci-fi paperbacks from
really?
the 60s to the 80s that I could dip into.
Oh, wow.
And
So,
some of them it was like ask first because maybe it's not
right,
appropriate for you at this age, but a lot of it I could just pick up. And so I wound up reading a lot of Asimov,
right,
Ray Bradbury, Larry Niven, Robert Heinlein, Frank Herbert, just growing up, because it was there and I love to read. So
right. So your dad was a kind of a pulpy sci-fi fan already,
yeah.
and your mom too? She was just more of a general reader. Like, what was
Uh,
her?
she's a general reader, but she's a horror fan and she's an
Oh,
artist. And so,
oh,
it's funny because this comes up in interviews sometimes, and she always, if she sees the interview, she always kids me about it. But um, when I was little, she would put like the Universal horror movies on in the background. They used to run them on,
right.
the afternoon movie or something.
Frankenstein
She
and
would just put it
Dracula.
on. Yeah,
Yeah,
Dracula, the Wolfman,
yeah, yeah.
and since I didn't seem to be frightened by them, she figured that was okay. And
Right.
little did she know that these images were just imprinting
Imprinting on the
themselves on
brain.
my
Right.
my brain at the time. Yeah.
So would you just out of curiosity, so my parents they weren't like sci-fi readers or horror readers, but they got me into like I watched classic Star Trek with them. They loved the Twilight Zone and that kind of thing, which definitely it's a combination of sci-fi and horror, even though you don't look at it that. And remember, was it A Night Gallery by
Oh yeah.
Rod
Yeah.
Serling, right? And even Planet of the Apes and that kind of thing. So did you have that kind of an influence too from there? Did you find that on your own? Like,
No, absolutely. We would watch Star Trek in reruns
yeah,
uh,
WPIX.
every Saturday night.
Yep.
Like sometimes we would break out the tray tables and have dinner while we watched
That's exactly.
Star
Yep.
Trek. Yeah.
That's exactly what we did.
Twilight Zone, same thing. Even Outer Limits, when that was rerun, was another one. Um, and
I never really watched Outer Limits.
oh, okay.
I,
Yeah.
I don't, I don't know. I don't even know why. How
It's
did, how,
worth
how did you,
checking
li- how
out.
did you like it compared to Twilight Zone? Just out of curiosity.
They're very different. They're very, very different. And I think with both of them, there are episodes of Outer Limits that are just brilliant. And then there are ones that are, let's just say, not brilliant.
That's fair.
But the Twilight Zone, it's the same way. I mean,
That's
how many
true. Yeah.
episodes of Twilight Zone are there? I don't think there were any. I can't ever think of a bad episode of Twilight Zone, but there are certainly like the ones that are that was okay,
Right.
and then the
Or
ones that are like that's
wow. Yeah.
the monsters that do
Y-
on Maple Street, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. They Twilight Zone was like from solid was usually like solid to great.
Yeah.
There were I can't think of any episode where I was like, oh man, that was terrible. Like I can't think of any that happened. I mean, I'm not saying there weren't any, but I can't think of any off the top of my head.
No, me neither.
So, all right, so let's go back for a second. So you moved around a bit on Long Island, and then you said you moved close to family. So who was the family that was around you, and what was it like to be in close proximity to the family?
It was nice. It was mostly, I think the closest was my grandmother on my mother's side.
Okay,
And that was great because I could ride my bicycle over there in the summer and visit. And my grandmother, like all grandparents, loved when a grandkid came to visit, especially if you came of your own will.
sure.
So I would just show up sometimes in the
Yeah,
summer on
right.
my bicycle, and my grandmother you could always count on being fed
Yep,
and offered some sort of sweet, like a milkshake or
yep.
some pound cake with ice cream or something. So that was
Milkshakes,
nice. Yeah, I had a
milkshakes with
really good.
grandma, right? That's not a bad memory.
Yeah, no, and I had a good relationship with my grandmother. She was really a wonderful woman and very supportive of everything that I did. So it was nice to have her that close.
Okay, so all right, so you mentioned so you were a reader and you were watching, the nerd stuff, the sci-fi and the horror.
Yeah.
So specifically, so you mentioned, you were reading Asimov, Bradbury, Herbert, Heinlein. What else were you what else were you reading? What else were you watching? And what else kept you busy at that time when you were a kid?
Reading, I jumped from sci-fi to fantasy.
Hmm,
Um, Tolkien was the first fantasy I read, The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, and
right.
thought that was fantastic. Moved on to this. I don't know if people remember that. I think some people remember this series. It was a shared world anthology series called Thieves' World.
Thieves World.
And every volume, it's like 8 volumes in this series, and each one is about characters in this world. The central city was called Sanctuary. It was like the Thieves Guild city.
Okay.
And it was just all different types of fantasy by authors working at that time. And I thought I read every book of that. I read a lot of
Huh,
Valentine Foster.
right.
His Spellsinger series was good. And then I stumbled into horror and started out. I think the first horror book I read was Salem's Lot by Stephen King.
Okay. Well, starting off light.
Starting off light and
Yeah.
in like the seventh grade. So, which was,
Jeez.
yeah, I have vivid memories of my seventh grade English teacher refusing to let me do a book report on Dune by Frank Herbert, which I had read,
Huh.
and insisting I pick something else. And she kind of forced me to go with White Fang by Jack London.
Okay.
To this day, I have not finished White Fang. It's nothing against White Fang,
Sure.
nothing
No,
against Jack London,
yeah, you're
but
being forced to read it. And you're like, screw
yeah,
that.
I read enough to do the book report and I probably got a less than stellar grade on it. But
Right.
it was just so like I couldn't understand why can't I just do this other book that's so.
Right.
But and you probably picked up on this too at that time. People really didn't give credit to genre fiction
No.
or genre TV, like science fiction, horror. That was all like substandard
You
compared to
know
the
what
classics.
word jumps out to me because I just remember hearing it so often was the word schlocky.
Yeah.
Like that word, it was sort of like if it was sci-fi or horror, it meant it was this like, oh, they had cheesy special effects and it's stupid with their rubber masks and it's
Yeah.
just dumb, but it was kind of awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome. It's still awesome. And
Yes.
there was something interesting that happened this week. I don't know if you saw it, but Daniel Krauss, who's a horror writer,
Right.
received the Pulitzer Prize for literature for his book Angel Down.
Oh, did he really? I didn't see that. Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that, a horror writer, he's co-written posthumously 2 novels with George Romero.
Right.
He wrote a book called Whale Fall that came out a few
Whalefall,
years
yeah.
ago. It was amazing. And to just think, how far things have come since the mid 80s
Yeah.
in terms of people's regard for genre literature or the society's regard for it. I think I kind of feel a little vindicated when I see stuff like that. I was like, I was right in seventh grade.
Yeah, you know what's interesting? I have this conversation a lot with people. So I remember, and I'm sure you do. So when Stephen King came about, no, I didn't read him initially. Um, it was when did he really kind of came up, right? It was Carrie, it was Salem's Lot,
Yeah.
um, then The Shining, but he was, Firestarter, and it was kind of like Cujo, and he was like the king of schlock, but he was big. And then he kind of graduated to some bigger things like The Stand and The Talisman. And he kind of was like at that time, sort of like at the peak of his powers. And then something seemed to happen where like suddenly it was cool to crap on Stephen King. That his like he wasn't a great writer, his endings always suck, he writes too long, and then like for years and years and years, it was like in vogue to like to crap on him. But then you remember he had that accident where he was in a car accident or something and he didn't write for a couple years.
Yeah.
And then he came back and it seems like in the last 10 years or so, he's now being revered in a very different way. And I wonder if some degree if the Flanagan translations are helping change the perception of him. And I just look at that as kind of more of like of being symbolic to like horror in general as a niche where kind of like it peaked, it dipped, and it was kind of considered like this underground stupid thing. But now it's sort of like, oh no, it's like a real thing.
Yeah, it's a great observation, and I think a lot of stuff happened with King. First of all, his career is, I mean, when did was Carrie was published in the early 70s, and so right, I think in the early 70s, and it's so we're talking about a career that has now spanned 50 plus years,
Right.
and he won the National Book Award at one point, so there was, kind of a recognition of his cultural importance as a writer. Um, and I think you were right. A lot of people and people still love to pick on King
Right.
for, not sticking the ending,
Right.
writing a 900-page book when a 400-page book might have done the job, that kind of
All
thing.
right.
But the proof is in the fact that people keep reading him.
Yes.
He wrote, he's known as a horror author, but his Dark Tower series, which is
Fantasy.
essentially a mix of genres and
Right.
fantasy and
Yeah.
things. I know I have not read the whole series, but I know people, a lot of people who avidly read every book in that series and followed it and loved the minutia and the world building and all of that. And I do think the adaptations have helped, but I think it started earlier than Mike Flanagan's work. I think it started with Frank Darabont.
Oh yeah, with Shawshank.
Shawshank and The Green Mile
The
in
Green Mile.
particular.
Both are great movies.
Yeah, and they're not straightforward horror movies,
No,
and
they're
so they're
not.
accessible to people who don't
Yeah.
like horror per se,
Correct. Correct.
who could come in and say, "Oh, this is a Stephen King story, but this
Right.
is actually really smart and moving and interesting."
Yeah. I mean, it did so
Yeah,
much other cool stuff. I mean, Apt Pupil, I
yeah,
loved. Um, Stand By Me, which was great. I mean, I know I read those novellas too. That
yeah.
was great. I want to see The Long Walk. I read the novella there. And actually, I don't know if you saw it. I actually want to watch it again. Did you see The Life of Chuck?
No, I haven't seen that one yet. Yeah,
So The Life of Chuck, I'm not going to say it's the best movie, but in the last 5 years, I would say it's in my top five favorite movies.
cool.
It
Okay.
just like I went with Don. We were at Stoker last year. We went off campus. We didn't know anything about it. Literally nothing. We were like, Tom Hiddleston's in it. I'm like, okay.
He's usually good.
It just mesmerized me. It's great. So like Stephen King he's so many things besides just horror. And whenever I hear people, kind of like crap on him, I
Yeah,
always think, how about this? Let's compare your career to his and let me know if you want to trade.
yeah. You can't do it. And he's sort of the popular fiction. He's a bulwark of popular fiction. He's like James Michener,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
I'm trying to think of some other, in I was going to say John Grisham, but I think John Grisham is
No.
too in his genre
He,
to
he's he's
really.
he's very niche specific and he has a lane and he sticks to that lane.
Yeah, well,
Stephen
like
King's kind of like
Thomas Wolfe. um,
Okay.
or people who write about a lot of different stuff and they
Right.
still bring across the things that make King's work interesting is he's gifted when it comes to creating characters.
Oh my God. It's so great.
His language, his prose style it's deceptively simple. It's really clear and easy to read, but there's so much packed into each sentence because of the thinking and experience behind it. And
Yep.
I think people respond to that.
I mean,
Yeah.
to this day, The Stand is one of my all-time favorite books.
Yeah.
I admit the ending, not great, but you know what? If you write 800 pages of awesome, I'm okay with it. It's my Bible. Anytime I get stuck, I pick up The Stand, I just open up to a random page and I find something great that helps inspire me for something else. It's
Yeah.
amazing,
Well, and my favorite King story is not even a horror story, or
right?
at least not an overt horror story. It's I forget which collection it included it, but it's called All That You Love Will Be Carried Away.
I don't know that one.
And it's basically about a guy who's taking a break from traveling at a rest stop and he's going through stuff and he sees that phrase scrawled in the men's room graffiti and it just resonates with him in a way that I haven't read the story in quite a while, but I remember that I think it was originally published in the New Yorker, possibly.
What's this one called?
All That You Love Will Be Carried Away.
All that.
And it grabbed me in a way no other King story has ever grabbed. And a lot of his stories have grabbed me. I mean, I love a lot of his short fiction. That
Yeah.
was right after Salem's Lot. I started with Night Shift, Skeleton
Gotcha.
Crew, and I'm
Yep.
like, just give me more short stories. It took
Right.
me a while to come back around to the novels because I was
Right.
enjoying the short stories so much.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
that's a good one if you get a chance to read it.
I definitely will. All right. So, okay, we'll wrap up this part of the show. So you spend a lot of time, you were comfortable kind of being a little bit of a loner, kind of you were comfortable doing your own thing for the most part. So let's kind of shift now. How did you start getting writing? So you've been just like me, you've been writing for a lot of years. How did you get started there?
Um, I really, it was just that I loved stories. So I read a lot of books. I read a lot of comics when I was a
Yes.
kid. I loved all the shows we were talking about, and then all the sci-fi and monster movies. I remember getting excited when I was a kid and WPIX did Planet of the Apes week
Oh my
or
God, yes.
Godzilla week, and
Uh-huh. Yep.
you just or End of the World week or whatever. It was like the Omega Man, Food of the Gods, Mysterious Island. I can't remember what the other one was, but and I just started making up my own stories. Um, and I think the first story I ever wrote was something I made up about my Shogun Warrior toys, which were these like 2.5, 3 foot plastic robot warriors that I wish I still had because apparently they're worth a lot of money
Of
now.
course they are, right?
Yeah. But just, goofy, kind of sci-fi toy that I loved when I was a kid. And I just started making up stories and I kept doing that. And I really wanted to be a comic book creator, a comic
Right.
book artist. And as much as I worked at it, I kind of realized that I was probably never going to draw as well as Bernie Wrightson. And that was my bar. When I was 12, I wanted to be Bernie Wrightson. That's what I wanted to do is I wanted to do Swamp Thing because I
Okay.
was so into Swamp Thing at that point. It was like the art was amazing. Story was amazing. I'm like, this is the best thing ever anyone has ever created in the world. The way you think about this stuff when you're a kid.
Yeah.
Um, and so when I realized I probably would never draw as well as Bernie writes, and I decided that I could still write the stories, and that's the direction I went.
Okay. So
Yeah,
we're gonna hold on, I got a comics question in here.
sure.
Okay, so I was gonna get to it later, but you beat me to it. So you and I we're both comic book guys, or
Yeah.
I don't read them as much as I used to, but so for you, because you came around, so we're gonna shift around. So for those of you who don't know, Jim wrote a great graphic novel based on Kolchak, the Night Stalker. Um, so first of all, kudos. Excellent job, Jim.
Thank you.
Um, And Kolchak is one of those, I had never heard of him until really kind of came along. I'm like, but then I remembered vaguely, I'm like, wait, did I remember seeing this on TV or something? So like without Kolchak, there's no X-Files. And without X-Files, there's no Fringe. Like
Yeah.
see the progression of how it goes. So as a guy who you read comics, you've written comics. So for you, how does the writing process differ when you're focused on a graphic novel as opposed to straight prose?
It's two very different sets of writing muscles that I use. And the biggest I guess the biggest thing I keep in mind when I'm writing a comic is that I'm not the only one telling the story. And I have to let the art tell the story. And so often when I'm writing a comic script, I'll write pages without any captions or dialogue. I'll just write, and I like to write full script, but I've worked also what's called the Marvel method, where you just write a plot breakdown page by page.
Yep.
But I'll write panel one, page one, panel one. This is what should be in the panel. I'll offer my take on it. It should be a large panel, or it should be this size, or this, bird's eye view or close up or whatever. All of which, if the artist wants to change, I'm fine with, because they have to be able to tell the story with their style too. But
Right.
what I
Yeah.
really want to do in that initial draft is get the images figured out. And then I can go back and say, well, we're going to see all of this in this panel. So I don't need to say any of that.
Yes.
And then I can focus on the stuff that the art isn't conveying. And that's where I figure out what to do with captions, narration, and dialogue.
It's actually interesting because I've written some comics as well.
Yeah.
Is that, when you write comics, you, in a way, it's simultaneously minimalist, but also I would argue, if it's the right word, maximalist. And what I mean is it's minimalist in that you're right. You need to let the art tell the story when and how appropriate. But to do that, you have to really get very intensely in a deconstruction mode because you need to understand here's everything that needs to be conveyed.
Yeah.
Now, how do I best convey it? Because when you're writing prose, everything has to be, if it's not on the page, it ain't there. So when you're writing the comics, you have to say, okay, here's what needs to be conveyed. How do I best convey it? Right? As writers, we want to do words, but you know what? Like in a fight scene, you could just say, hero punches villain in face, and they just do it. You don't have to describe all the art's going to take care of all that, but also what else is going on in the frame or in the scene that's important to tell the story. You have to know that.
Yeah.
And you have to trust that the artist is going to fill in gaps and see things that maybe you didn't even see.
Oh yeah, 100%. The artist is going to bring something to the storytelling. And I think what I focus on is, even in writing action, where maybe there's a very little dialogue or captions on the page, I try to convey where the focus should be, where the
Yeah,
emphasis should be. Like,
right.
if there are multiple characters, this is the one that's,
Getting a lot of
spotlight in this action scene, right? Like,
right. Yes.
but you have to be really, at times you have to be oddly specific too, because if you um, just say, this main character is sitting alone in their apartment, they have a cup of coffee and they're thinking. You have no idea what that apartment is going to look like. And the artist has no idea what the apartment is going to look like.
Right.
Now, you want that person in an apartment that says something about their character, says something about their world,
Right.
builds the story.
Right. So
So you've
what?
got to put that in there. You've got to let the
Correct.
artist know this is, in an apartment 5 years from now, and everything has a digital screen and a QR code so that you can scan, things, and it's a sci-fi apartment, or sits in his bare apartment on a folding lawn chair and looks out his cracked window, kind of thing, just so
Yep.
he's not
Yeah,
in a great place. But if you
absolutely.
don't put that in, then the artist doesn't know,
Mm,
and
that's
a
right.
good artist will intuit it, or ask you
Right.
and
Yep.
say, "You didn't give me enough here. Well,
That's right.
let's
That's
go
right.
over this." Yeah,
Absolutely right. Yeah, yeah. It's really amazing when you rely on the visual medium to impact the story,
yeah,
how much you really have to focus on all, like you have to be able to see it And because you can say when you're writing prose, you can sprinkle in a detail or two and you trust that the reader will fill in the gaps themselves. But when
Right.
it's a visual medium, you got to give them the stuff. So you have to think it through at a level that you might not necessarily need in prose. So let's go back to horror for a minute. So you write across multiple genres. So do you consider for you is horror your go-to, or do you just kind of write what appeals to you and then you focus on the genre once you get going?
It's a little of both. Horror, I've probably written more horror than anything, and it's one of the genres where I feel the most comfortable.
Right.
And a lot of my ideas lend themselves to horror stories because they tackle dark topics, dark themes, difficult situations. But a lot of the time, if I'm writing, I mean, I've written in a lot of other genres, and partly because I've been very fortunate. I've been asked by editors to write for stuff, and they've trusted me to try something new. They've asked me to write sci-fi, fantasy, steampunk, crime. I've had these opportunities, and that's kind of my toe in the door. Let me explore this little niche in this other genre and see how I like it and see if I think I'm good at it, see what the editor thinks. And so in that way, I've built up, a body of work that spans multiple genres. I love doing that because you've got to change, you really have to change hats.
Yeah,
If you're writing a science fiction story, the mechanics are different than a horror story.
they are.
Uh,
Yes, they
yeah,
are.
yeah. And if you're writing a fantasy story, another set of mechanics. You're writing pulp. I've had the chance to write some of the old pulp characters like the
Yep.
Avenger and the Green Hornet. That's another
Yep.
world.
Yep.
There are certain expectations in these subgenres and genres, and you have to learn them all and figure out how to write them well.
I'm actually doing that right now. I'm writing my first ever vampire story, and but it's also my usual, I do complex plots and I'm very pulpy and I'm just like a lot, it's a mix of genres, but like I'm not a vampire expert per se. And I'm like, well, do vampires do this and how would that work? And does that work? And a lot of it's like, well, just decide what kind of vampire you have. But even still, you have to be consistent within your own world building and you have to figure out how things work. And like writing a lot of sci-fi, I know that space, but this is a
Yes.
different thing. And like, I don't have all these gadgets that can like solve problems and do things. So yeah. So within horror, and horror is broad, right? When you say horror,
Yeah.
what niche within horror most appeals to you?
Cosmic horror.
Okay. So that's where I was headed.
Okay.
I was pretty sure that's what you were gonna say. So just for clarification. So let's talk about cosmic horror. Do you see that as being the same as, so let me ask you this. What's the difference between, in your minds, cosmic horror or galactic horror versus sci-fi horror?
So the difference is, and there really is a fine line between cosmic horror and sci-fi horror, but the difference is that in sci-fi horror, you're more likely to learn the rules and understand what it is that's creating the horror. In cosmic horror, you encounter something that you cannot understand, that changes your perceptions of the universe, how the universe works, your place in the universe, in a way that it just isn't ex explicable, and yet you know that this is real. So in sci-fi horror, a monster. So like think of a great example of sci-fi horror. Alien is
Right,
probably the one everybody thinks of. I guess, that whole genre, monster movie-ish, but that's sci-fi horror. We're out in space.
right.
We encounter an alien life form, and the alien life form turns
Tries to
into
kill me.
yeah, exactly. But by the end of the movie, you understand the alien life form.
Right,
Not 100%, but enough that you know that if it bleeds on you, it's acid, that it's got two mouths, and that, one way to kill it, hopefully, is to blow it out the
the airlock.
airlock into
Right,
space. Like in cosmic horror, you would never get to that point. You would have
right.
this encounter with the thing, and it would either you would survive it and go on utterly changed by the fact that you had an encounter with something horribly monstrous from the cosmos that you cannot explain. But you know it's real and you know it belongs. That's the other piece. I think it's like you encounter these phenomena or these entities that you know belong. The characters know belong in the universe. It's not like a ghost or some demon that's been summoned from another universe. It's part of the world you live in, the universe you live in, but you still can't explain it. To me, that's where the line between sci-fi horror and cosmic horror appears. And I'm sure there are other things too. I mean, if you ask, I'm already like hearing half a dozen writers I know in the back of my head saying, well, I
Uh,
would, you know,
I mean, like Event Horizon is like a real creepy. I
yeah,
haven't seen it in a long time. It's like the thing, the demonic presence out there. It's part of their lived experience, but I don't know. Like,
right. Yeah,
no one ever says, well, this is where the demonic presence come from, and this is where they don't explain the mechanics of how it got there. It's just there.
yeah. So Cthulhu is a great example.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
read the original Call of Cthulhu story. That's brilliant cosmic horror. Lovecraft's works have spawned countless novels, short stories, role-playing games, all sorts of stuff, digging
Oh,
into that.
right.
By the time I got around to reading books or stories where characters were defeating Cthulhu with guns and bombs,
Right, which is
that's sci-fi horror.
yes.
Call of Cthulhu, this Lovecraft stories, cosmic horror. If you can blow Cthulhu up with hand grenades and wound him with machine guns, that's
Yeah.
sci-fi horror.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yes. Yeah. If it bleeds,
We can kill it.
yeah, right. Well, if it bleeds, it's
It's
sci-fi, right?
sci-fi. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's shift a little bit. So you have this little thing that you do every once in a while called Galactic Terrors.
Yes.
So talk to us about that. How did that get started and what's it all about?
Yeah, so I co-host with Carol Geisander, who's also my co-chair in the Horror Writers Association New York chapter, an online reading series sponsored by the chapter called Galactic Terrors. And we started this in September of 2020. And the exact origins of it are a little labyrinthine and probably not that interesting, but suffice to say, we couldn't do live readings in 2020 for obvious reasons.
Yep.
And we wanted to take a crack at doing something online, just to keep the members of our chapter engaged, reach out to other authors around the country, around the world, actually. And we launched this thing called Galactic Terrors. And it's Galactic Terrors because we are not really strict about genre. It's horror focused, but we've had sci-fi, we've had people read crime, and we're fantasy. We're pretty open to what people read, and it's gone through some evolution. So I think we've settled into a really nice format that we've used for the last couple of years, where we usually have three readers
Right.
on. But we've done occasional special episodes with additional readers and special guests and things like that. Um, but as soon as we started doing it, we realized one of the really cool things about this is that we could have authors on from other parts of the world. So we've had authors on from Australia, from New Zealand. We've had authors on from um, California on a regular basis. So I think we've had several authors, anywhere in the country, as long as we could manage the time difference, they could come on. And
Yeah.
if we couldn't manage the time difference, some of them sent us a recorded reading that we just
Okay.
aired.
Very cool.
But it's black. You've been on it,
Yes.
right? Yeah,
A
I think
couple years ago, yeah.
yeah, we got to have you back.
Anytime. Anytime.
But it's fun, and the most interesting thing to me has been getting the sense that what our audience most enjoys is the Q&A with the author after their reading.
Yeah.
So the author comes on, they do finish their reading. Carol or I or both of us come on and do some Q&A, and we take questions from the chat, live questions. And, sometimes the audience gets so into it and asks such great questions. And we have great conversations just talking, process and writing experience and things like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah. It was great. Anytime you want to bring me back, just give me a shout.
Well, now that you're writing a vampire story, I mean,
Yeah. Yes, that'll be out later this year.
okay, let me know when, because that would be a great one to talk about.
I would love to, yes.
Yeah.
Um, So let's pivot a little bit there. So not only do you do Galactic Terrors with Carol Geisander, you're also co-chair of the Horror Writers Association, the New York chapter. So what's going on? So I've been now with HWA for the last couple of years. It's fine. I've told this story many times. If you went back 4 or 5 years ago on this show, you would have heard me say, I ain't a horror guy. I don't know horror. I don't like horror. And then I realized, I kind of do like horror. Lot more than I thought I did, because I just instinctively I don't go there. But well, but I love, Nightmare on Elm Street and
Yeah.
American Werewolf in London and The Fly and Aliens and the Thing. And I'm like, well, maybe I like it more than I think I do. And I started getting into it, and now it's kind of like the space that I'm in. But I'm still, I've now, gone to Stoker a bunch of I went last year. I'll see you there in a month, and Camp Necon and a bunch of other things, and done some of the readings. But I'm still, getting to know folks. And so what's going on with so broadly speaking, what's going on with HWA and what's going on with the New York chapter? So for those who want to be more involved or interested, like just what, like basically sell me, like what if I'm a person, why would I want to be involved? Like what does it offer? What are you guys bringing to the table?
Well, I think the biggest benefit of being an HWA member is opportunities to connect with other horror writers, to network, to it depends on where you are in your writing journey too. If you're just starting out, the HWA is a great source for mentors. They have a formal mentorship program, but it's also and you may have experienced this, Russ, just the horror community in general is a really um, friendly, welcoming, supportive group. And if you come in as a new horror writer and ask, more experienced writers for advice, they're happy to tell you. It's not like that in every writing community, I think.
Yes. No, I
Yeah.
I can say that for sure. And I've told this story many times. So I kind
Yeah.
of was in three lanes, like sci-fi, traditional mystery and crime, and then horror. And every community has its own, brings a certain thing to the table, and I've appreciated certain elements of all of them. But broadly speaking, a few individuals aside, I've gotten so much, there's been so much openness, and I felt so welcome within the horror community right away in a way that didn't necessarily happen in the other ones. It took longer for me to kind of like find my way through it. I found that the horror community has been very, very accepting, very open, very enthusiastic. Um, it's been, there are always little issues, but I don't really care about those.
Yeah.
All I know is that my personal experience, that's all I'll say, has been net very, very positive.
Yeah, mine too. And that's one of the reasons that I volunteer in the HWA and co-chair the local chapter. It's a great opportunity to connect with other people who write work in the same, ballpark that I write in, or who like a lot of the same things, and share insight, share information, support each other. So I think that's the biggest benefit as an HWA member. There's a lot to get involved with, and it's more than I could go into here. But if anyone's interested, they should check out horror.org, which is the HWA's website. And the New York chapter is hwany.org if you're local to New York and interested. But we have new members coming on. We've actually had several join this year, and they're often feeling cut off from, a writing community, especially because they're writing horror.
Hmm.
So they come in and they're just really happy to meet people who are into what they're doing
Mm.
and ready to answer questions and offer, advice when they can. But I think a lot of that, I mean, this is my personal theory, is that horror spent, we were talking about this before, horror spent so many years at the bottom
Yeah.
of, the barrel essentially for genre fiction. And I think a lot of horror authors still feel that and think, well, we're all in this together because we're all, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
we know it's not. We know obviously that the genre is
Robust.
it's robust, it's vibrant. There's so many new and so many different voices writing in horror today. It's amazing. It's probably more vital than it has ever been as a genre, and I just love seeing that.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that was great, but now it's a time for a special segment on the show where we spin the wheel on the wheel of seven possible categories, including a few new ones I brought out for tonight's show. Wherever it lands is what you get, and the categories are Kiss of the Damned, The Truth Is Out There, Stranger in a Strange Land, Soundtrack of Your Life, Quantum Leap, To Serve Mankind, and The Dream Team. All
Oof.
right, so I'm going to give it a spin and let's see what happens. All right, Jimbo, what do we got for you? We got, ooh, the Dream Team. What kind of lunacy did I come up with this one? Who knows? I can never remember. Okay. Ooh. Ah, here we go. All right. So you can sign up for a writer's room for a series of horror novels. You can pick any four writers, dead or alive, to join you in the writer's room. Who is on your horror writer's dream team?
I'm going to go with all dead authors because I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings.
Uh-huh.
And
Okay,
it's
fair.
it's it's Edgar Allan Poe,
Yep.
it's Shirley Jackson,
Okay.
it's Richard Matheson,
Yep.
and it's Mary Shelley.
Wow, I think you did okay there.
Yeah, that's
Okay. All right, good choices, good choices. Yes. All right, so now it's time to pick your poison. I got three choices for you. I'm not going to tell you what's behind each one. These are
okay.
all new categories. You got A, B, or C.
B.
B. All right, success or bust. Writers often talk about, think about, and are asked about what it means to be successful. But every writer has their own definition of success, which may change at various stages of their career. So, given where you are today, and this is as an author, what is your definition of success? And how does that definition compare, if at all, to when you first started writing seriously?
Yeah, there's so many levels to that. Thanks,
Hmm.
thanks for an easy question, Russ.
Hey,
Uh,
you picked it, not me.
I think my most basic definition of success as a writer hasn't changed much since I started, which is I want to write something that I am happy with.
Hmm.
And then if I feel that I've put the story out there the best possible way I can with, the best writing that I can produce, I take that as a win. And a lot of stuff that happens after that, writers have no control over. And so everything else is sort of then navigating. It's not so much writing, it's business, it's
Yep. Okay.
submissions, it's contracts, it's publications, it's I think all writers really aspire to commercial success. We all would love to be paid sufficiently for our writing to do it full time. And that's increasingly more difficult. It's harder now than it was 30 years ago to do that, because of the way the publishing industry has changed, and the dynamic has changed. Reading habits have changed. It's just, it's a different world. And it's still possible to do that, and many writers do. And that's sort of the commercial, um, I guess, grown up definition of success is commercial success. But as an author, as a writer, as a creator, I want to create work that pleases me.
Well, I'm with you. My
Very
rule,
selfish.
yeah, no. My rule of thumb is if I'm not proud to put my name on it, I won't.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Well, I'm a reader, and if I
Yeah.
write something and I don't like it,
Right.
why would I expect a
Yeah.
reader to like
Totally.
it? So I feel like if I please myself, others will like it. Not everybody,
Right.
maybe, not everything is everyone's cup of tea.
For sure. For
Yeah.
sure. I'm with you now. I was having a conversation. So the folks at home, so Jim and I have a mutual friend. This is Don, and we're
Mhm.
working on a project, and within the horror space, there are certain things that are sort of like acceptable to sort of like, well, you don't really have to explain how the thing got here or how the monster did this or that. You just have to show it. But for us, that's not good enough. I not only need to know how it happened, I have to show you. I feel like I have to earn everything. I
Mhm.
can't cheat. And I have to, like, if I don't fill in those gaps, even if the readers would be forgiving, I'm not forgiving as the author. I have to feel like I put my best foot forward on the page. Otherwise, I got to earn it or it doesn't count. Maybe whether it does or it doesn't to other people, I don't know, but it matters to me.
And that's all that matters when you're writing, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. All right. Thanks, Jim. So now I'm going to give you some truth serum. I got 10 questions for you. You ready?
All right.
All right. Favorite flavor ice cream.
Pistachio,
Okay. What's one food you will never eat ever for any reason?
oysters,
Ooh, I'm with you. Bucket list destination anywhere in the world.
Tokyo.
Ooh, mine as well. Scariest movie you ever saw?
All right. I have to cheat a little on this one. It's a really corny, low budget movie from the 70s called Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. And when I was 8 and it was on TV, it scared the hell out of me.
Hmm.
I've never been that scared by a movie since, and that's why I have to go with that childhood trauma.
Okay, fair enough. Well, we've all got some of that.
Yeah.
If you could have one superpower, what would it be?
Flight.
Do you play any musical instruments? And if not, which one if you could?
I do play a little guitar.
Okay. All right. Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Favorite cocktail? And if you don't drink, your favorite unwind beverage?
Manhattan.
You can see a live performance, sports, music, theater, whatever, any seat, any venue, any time in history. What's your choice?
I want, you know what? I don't particularly care about the venue or the seat, but I would be Nirvana because I was getting ready to get tickets for their tour when Kurt Cobain killed himself.
I
And at the
missed.
time, they were my absolute favorite.
Yeah, mine too. They were starting to tour, and I wanted to see them, and I just like they came, I just missed them, and I never had a chance to see them again because they weren't around for that long. But yeah, okay, fair enough. Okay, so now we're gonna go to our advice column. So, what's the best and worst writing advice specific to horror that you've heard anyone give to aspiring writers?
The best and the worst.
Specific to horror.
Yeah, I have to be honest. I haven't heard a lot of bad advice given.
Okay.
Um, and or at least nothing that springs to mind. The best advice I've heard, and I think this generally applies to, unfortunately, not just horror. But if we're talking horror, it's um, the best advice is create your own monsters, essentially. So, people love to write Lovecraftian horror, and I've written a fair amount of it myself, drawing on the Lovecraft mythos, Cthulhu, and Nyarlathotep and all that. But I've also written a lot of horror that has nothing to do with that, where I've created the mythology myself. It's an original mythology, and I think that's the best advice I've heard is create your own mythology, essentially, because it's fun to work in, fun to write in other people's sandboxes, but you can't really be yourself as a writer if you're doing that all the time.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Thank you, Jim. All right, guys, we're coming to the end of the show. So I got a surprise for you, as I always do. Just hang on a second. I'm going to share my screen and let's see what kind of goodies Jim has here for it. All right, Jim. So talk to me. What am I looking at?
The cover of A Bright and Beautiful Eternal World. This is my most recent short story collection. It is the aforementioned Lovecraftian cosmic horror.
I cracked that code.
Yep. It's, but I have a lot of fun with it because I try to do stuff Lovecraft would never do one of his stories. And it's set in a fictional town on Long Island, and it all takes place around this town over a span of time from like the 50s to the far future. Um, and I have a lot of fun with it. So this was published a couple of years ago by Weird House Press, who produce beautiful books. And there was recently an audiobook released
Oh,
version of it on
cool.
Audible. So if you're into audiobooks, you can look this up on Audible. And yeah, so that's A Bright and Beautiful Eternal World. And should I mention that other?
Sure. You said you had another book coming out.
I do. I have a book coming out in September called Abandoned Asylum. And this one's an anthology that I've edited. Raw Dog Screaming Press is going to be publishing it. We're actually going to be doing a Kickstarter in June to help with a little bit of the production costs and as a way to take pre-orders, because the book features stories inspired by photographs I've taken of a real world abandoned psychiatric hospital.
Wow.
I've spent years hiking at this location on Long Island, taking pictures, and I thought this would be kind of cool. I shared a bunch of pictures with a bunch of authors and invited them to write stories, and then I wrote a narrative framing sequence around it. So it's a kind of an unusual book in that way, and the pictures will be included in the book. So I'm really excited about it. So
Cool.
hopefully people will like it.
Very nice. I've actually done a couple of abandoned psychiatric center elements as well, and
Cool.
a couple of things, including something new that's coming out.
Okay.
All right, very good, Jim. So, for folks who don't have it, A Bright and Beautiful Eternal World, grab a copy. I've known Jim a long time. The guy can write his keister off. So, if you like particularly cosmic or galactic horror, I strongly recommend you give this a chance. All right, as for me, so this is Blunt Force Rising. Now, since we're talking about horror, so for those of you who don't know, I've been writing the Angela Hardwick sci-fi thriller series. Hardwick to me is part Blade Runner, part Doctor Who, and part John Wick. This is actually the fourth book in the series. They're all standalone thrillers, so you can start anywhere. So in this one, Hardwick and her protege are providing private security here on a galactic cruise ship during an AI and robotics conference at a time when androids have been granted rights. But just because they have rights on paper doesn't necessarily mean that everyone's okay with it. Well, while they're on the ship, a murder takes place and it sets off a chain reaction. And what happens is, as you can see on the electrified field here, all the communications are knocked out. You're literally a million miles from anywhere. There's no one to call. There's no way to get off the ship. And essentially, a zombie apocalypse has broken loose between humans and androids. And it's a bloody, vicious fight to the finish. This is a hardcore, closed room action thriller. It's intense, it's psychological horror, it's body horror. And either you're going to make it to the end or you are not. So Blunt Force Rising is the fourth book in the series, and it is published by, it's on available on Amazon and published by Crazy 8 Press. Okay, that is our show, and that's our season. So I want to thank my buddy and guest, Jim Chambers, for coming on board for the season finale to talk about his life and career. And I want to thank everyone who's going to be watching at home. And as always, be gentle, be kind, be generous of spirits, and for God's sake,
Yeah.
go read a book. And after I wrap up my summer book tour, which I'll be seeing Jim in about a month at StokerCon, I'll see
Awesome.
you back in the fall of 2026 for a whole new season. That's it for me, guys. Thanks for another great season, another great show, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye now.